This is BattleBit. Chances are that by now you've heard of it. A low poly style, block-filled spiritual successor to the Battlefield games of old. Released on June 15th, BattleBit has already risen to the best-selling premium game on Steam globally, with its concurrent player peak hitting over 87,000 players on June 25th, and no sign of stopping anytime soon. Somehow, just 3 developers managed to create a game that has blown AAA development studios out of the water and filled a void that many FPS enthusiasts hadn't felt occupied for years. But how did they do it? What were the ingredients, the circumstances, the secret formula for this monumental success in gaming? This video takes a deep dive into the perfect storm that was BattleBit's launch. Now, let's get into a little bit of a history lesson with this one first. BattleBit originally started development in June of 2016, so we're talking 7 years ago now. Velasquez Shalashev from Belarus and Okeanis Mutlu from Turkey, 2 friends that originally started off making mods for a similarly low-poly game called Unturned, began the project together and by April of 2017 had posted the game on Steam Greenlight. Now, if you've forgotten what that is, it was essentially a system where indie devs could submit their games and the general public would vote for which ones they wanted to see on the Steam store. BattleBit was greenlit in just 9 days. In an interview in 2018 with 80.lv, Velasquez said, and I quote, "After some brainstorming, we chose to do a low poly style game rich with in-game features and game mechanics. This was to be one of the building blocks, no pun intended, for BattleBit itself, and 5 years on from this interview, we can still see that the core aspiration is reflected in the finished product." Interestingly, Velasquez put up some YouTube videos on his own channel during development, showing some footage from the playtests, and you can see some subtle differences in the playtest footage compared to the finished product that we have today. Uniform designs, animations, but the graphical element has stayed mostly the same, and this, combined with the quote I mentioned previously, brings me nicely to the first ingredient of many that added up to BattleBit's secret formula: content over graphics. We've already seen that detailed mechanics and a content-rich product was something the developers were aiming for from the early stages, which is something that's critically different to the approach of most development studios in recent years. In the last 10 to 20 years, graphics in video games have improved leaps and bounds from where they were. Development studios, especially AAA studios, are constantly driven to have the most realistic or graphically immersive game on the market, and those goalposts are always shifting thanks to competition. And yet, despite some huge breakthroughs in graphical technology and some incredibly realistic settings, reviews have proven time and time again that graphics aren't everything. A beautiful game is to be appreciated, but it doesn't make for an enjoyable game, at least not on its own. BattleBit, on the other hand, has completely disregarded the arms race that is graphical superiority and had chosen from the early stages that it was going to focus on mechanics and plentiful levels of content. All the features we'd expect from first-person shooters are there, and some stuff that I think most players would only expect from tactical shooters too. Magazine checking, independent head turning from the player's body, repacking half-used magazines, rappelling from helicopters, breaching tools like sledgehammers and pickaxes, and the list goes on. These are all small but impactful implementations that offer the player multiple avenues to engage in combat, providing variety in the experience each time you play. Where time, effort, and considerable amounts of the budget in large projects may go towards graphical fidelity, BattleBit instead chose to produce stuff that would keep the player going for longer. There's now just over 40 weapons in BattleBit, each with their own progression to acquire over 70 different attachments. There are 17 unique maps, including the shooting range, and 8 game modes available, with up to 254 players on a single server. The low-poly approach allowed the BattleBit developers to produce levels of content that nowadays we rarely see in new releases, and it's paid off. This is purely opinion, of course, but based on the raging success of BattleBit, and just from being wired into various gaming communities in recent years, players don't feel they need graphics anymore. We've been there, we've done that. Yes, it looks great, but if I can't play the game for more than 10 hours, what's the point? It's a fleeting moment that, while whilst it may be enjoyable, I'm left wanting more from. I'm not ashamed to say that I've played 70 hours of BattleBit since launch, and I'm not even remotely tired of it. There's more for me to achieve, more for me to unlock, and still plenty of aspects of the game I can try or learn to get a new experience. Content over graphics, the first part of the formula. Next, let's talk about what I'm going to call the vacuum. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I'm not a fan of when people say there's a quote-unquote gaming drought. Chances are what they actually mean is there's no games that I enjoy, and there's usually plenty of games out there that they either haven't tried or aren't interested in giving a shot. It's a common phrase that gets bandied around quite a bit nowadays, especially by players that ultimately prefer the way certain games and franchises used to be over their new visions and innovations. Now, undeniably, BattleBit is similar to Battlefield in the way that it plays. That's just a fact. The game modes are similar. The combined arms gameplay on a massive scale is similar. Destructible environments. Heck, some of the maps are even built to resemble certain parts of the Battlefield maps from across various games in the franchise. BattleBit has been built to capture the essence of what Battlefield once was. After the release of Battlefield 2042, I think it's fair to say that many individuals that would usually show interest in the franchise were left disillusioned and displeased by the release. They strayed away from things like a defined class-based system in favor of more hero-esque operators with unique abilities. The maps were no longer entirely destructible, and movement had been changed to a more fast-paced tempo. Regardless of whether you loved or hated Battlefield 2042, it wasn't the traditional Battlefield experience that many players wanted. A large portion of players were left wanting more, so we have a whole lot of people that were left with the vacuum, a space left empty by a disappointing purchase from a franchise they feel strongly nostalgic for. Battlefield 2042 released on October 6th of 2021. Just 2 months later, on December 26th of 2021, BattleBit hosted its first of 3 playtests, sowing the seed that would later be nurtured across the 2 latter playtests and eventually bloom on the release of the game in June of 2023. Whether this was planned or coincidentally good timing, BattleBit grabbed the attention of many Battlefield enthusiasts with this playtest and filled the vacuum left by Battlefield 2042. It catered to the wants of those that preferred titles like Battlefield Bad Company 2 or Battlefield 3, sticking to the boots-on-the-ground, simplistic gameplay in a modern setting over the use of high-tech gadgetry in a futuristic setting. Perfect timing and feeding that nostalgic hunger that so many players have right now for the way things used to be. So at this point, we can see things are shaping up pretty well for BattleBit, and ultimately, they already have a lot of what they need to make a fantastic product that's going to cater to a wide range of players. But there's one final ingredient that can be added to this cake to really make it spectacular. The icing, if you will. Accessibility. By this, I literally mean how easy it is for people to get their hands on and play the game without having any issues in doing so. Let's start with technical requirements. In recent years, I'm sure we've all felt the rising cost of living, and specifically when it comes to gaming, the cost of upgrading what's under the hood in your gaming rig. We find ourselves in a race where only those with the biggest levels of disposable income can acquire the newest hardware, whilst the many linger in the pack behind the leader, chasing and chasing, only to find that new hardware is releasing all the time and games continue to demand more and more from their PC. They are being left further and further behind in this race. So when BattleBit comes along with its recommended specifications of a GTX 600 series graphics card and an Intel i5 4th generation CPU requiring just 2 gigs of storage space, why wouldn't people be tempted to give it a try? For context, the 600 series of graphics cards were released over 10 years ago. This game could probably run on the touchscreens at McDonald's. Hell, I'm pretty sure I have a Casio calculator somewhere that could run it. Combine this with its $15 price point, and you've a game that, by modern standards, is highly accessible, purchasable, and playable playable for almost anyone. We live in a world where the newest AAA games are costing $70 US just for the standard version of the game. That's over 4 times as much. And that's without getting into the discussion of them even being complete on release or releasing paid DLC. In the end then, it doesn't come down to that one thing that BattleBit has done to see so much success. Rather, it has combined so many aspects of gaming that we once thought lost to time. Low specification requirements, low pricing, simple and feature-filled gameplay with progression and staggered achievable goals to offer hundreds of hours of playtime. 3 guys managed to embody what many feel we can't get from modern game development studios: a finished, polished, well-rounded product for an affordable price. That's it. That's the secret formula. It simply provided a finished game for a low price. So that's it from me in this video, but I really hope you enjoyed it. Whether you agree or disagree with my analysis, let me know in the comment section below. As always, I'm eager to hear your thoughts and have a positive discussion with you folks about BattleBit. If you haven't seen much BattleBit yet and want to play with myself and some of my community, or just want to hang out and watch the game, consider dropping by my Discord. I'll leave a link in the description. We've been streaming BattleBit regularly, running squads with the community, and it's been awesome seeing so many people group up to play. Special thank you to my Patreon supporters for their ongoing support towards my content and our various other projects outside of YouTube. Thanks folks, and I will see you all in the next one.